Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Slaughterhouse Run by Clayton Smith, narrated by Patrick Lawlor. 1. Ben Fogelvy felt like shit. He was in his 5th round of fever, and this one was on day 8. His face was hot, his head was on fire, and the rest of his body was cold as ice. His bones hurt from shivering, and his stomach cramped from hours and hours of dry-heave retching, throwing up nothing but hot air and green bile. He hadn't eaten anything in the last few days, except for a few strips of rabbit meat 2 nights before that he'd puked into his own lap because he was too tired to turn his head. His clothes were soaked with sweat. He was freezing. His skull was a sauna. "Fucking kill me," he said out loud. He looked around. He was alone in the train car. "Hey!" he shouted toward the next car. "I said kill me!" The door into the next car slid open. A girl peered out at him. She was tall and broad and might have passed for a grown adult, except her face was too round, her eyes were too wide, her curls were too blonde, and her cheeks were too pink. She wore glasses that had somehow managed to escape serious harm this far into the apocalypse, probably due to the sheer thickness of the lenses. She had once told Ben how old she thought she was, but he hadn't really been listening, because he never really listened to any of the redcaps. Every time he got attached to one, they got a spear to the chest, or their brains were eaten out by wolves, or, in one particularly disappointing example, they accidentally tripped into a hungry badger's den and were never quite the same after. It was better not to get to know them, because if you got to know them, you were always the one who was asked to say a few words at their sad, embarrassing funerals. Ben hated making speeches. He had the sense that the redcap staring out at him was 15 maybe, or 16 at most. She seemed like a good kid, so Ben had remembered her name as a reward. "Gabs, kill me," he wheezed. "For the 800th time, it's Babs," she said, rolling her eyes. "And do you actually need something, or are you just looking for someone to swim in your swamp of self-pity?" "It's not a swamp of self-pity," Ben insisted, though to be honest, his body did feel pretty swampy. "It's a rock of resignation. Please, join me on my rock of resignation and push me out of this speeding train." Babs straightened the red cap on her head. It didn't quite fit right over her mop of curly hair. Sometimes she found things to clip it down with, but not today. "First of all, you're sitting at the steps. You're sitting at the steps. If you want off the train, you just have to lean a super little bit to your left." "I have to be thrown," Ben glowered, "or else it's just sad." "Secondly," Babs said, ignoring him, "the fog is so thick Horace has us going like 10 miles an hour tops. You wouldn't die. You'd just get scraped up, and then you'd have one more thing to complain about." "That's probably what he wants," called a voice behind Babs. Ben knew that voice. It was from the big dope, another young one, the boy with black hair and bad skin who looked like a cross between the X-Men's Blob and a Cabbage Patch doll. "That's not what I want," Ben shouted at the Cabbage Patch Blob over Babs's shoulder. "And you should treat the ill and infirm with kindness." He coughed violently into his arm. His sleeve came away covered in fresh green and yellow mucus. He held it up for Babs to see. "See?" "I'll kill him," said the 3rd redcap. She stared out at Ben from behind Babs and locked him in grip of her fire-black eyes. She pulled a bowie knife from the sheath she wore at her hip. She put the point of the blade to her own chin and looked at Ben coldly. "A mercy killing." Ben frowned. "Wait, no, not you. You'd enjoy it too much." "I'd enjoy it a lot," she confirmed. Ben remembered her name. He remembered it because she was so scary. Even though she was just as young as the other two, and 5 feet nothing with bones as light and as hollow as a bird's, she was a terrifying creature. Her eyes were inkwells of darkness, and she very rarely blinked. Her skin was the color of moonbeams, and her hair was as raven dark as her eyes. She spoke brutally with clipped and confident words. When they went out to hunt, she was the one who would take down the animal. Close-range weapons only. The knife was her favorite, but she was just as comfortable with a machete, a baton, a pair of brass knuckles. One time, she'd brought down a mountain lion with just a length of fishing line. A grown-ass fucking mountain lion. She was fast as a hawk and as vicious as a bear, and the way she looked at him, he knew she could and would end his life as simply and cleanly as if he were any other animal. He'd never met anyone so casually soulless. Even Bloom, whom Ben considered to be pretty goddamn soulless, was at least a little showy about it. But not her. Not Alice. "Let's keep her and her knife away from me, okay, team?" Babs snorted, "See? Told you it was self-pity." She slid the door shut, leaving Ben alone with his bad mood and fever once more. "Stupid kids," he mumbled to himself. "No respect for their elders." Ben looked around for Patrick. His fever-dream friend was appearing less and less often lately. Ben was starting to get the sense that even his own imagination was getting tired of his moping around. But what was he supposed to do about it? He was sick. He was dying. He was literally dying of the green flu, and no one cared enough about it to humor his every whim. "I'm going to come back and haunt them all," Ben promised himself for the 5th time that day. "If Patrick were here, he'd just make me angry," Ben decided aloud. "He'd make some joke about monkey soup and completely dismiss my suffering." He crossed his arms and closed his eyes. Being so obstinate for so many minutes straight had caused his head to throb even more, and he took some deep breaths and let himself feel the cool air of the Blue Ridge Mountains blow across his skin. He should go easier on the baby caps, he knew. They didn't ask for this world any more than he did. They were kids. They were lonely. They were trying. It wasn't their fault that Patrick was dead and that Ben was almost there too. He just felt scared. Alone and scared. "Ben!" Patrick shouted. "Ben!" Ben smiled. Good timing, fever brain. He opened his eyes. He expected Pat to be sitting across the coupler, or maybe poking his head out from the car behind him, the one that mostly served as Ben's private brooding space. But he wasn't. There was no one there. Ben wrinkled his brow. "Pat?" "Ben!" Patrick shouted again. "Ben! Stop!" Ben turned his head toward the voice. It was coming from outside the train. He struggled to crane his neck and peer over his shoulder toward the rear of the train. Past the last car, maybe 100 or so feet down the track, a shadowy figure with gangly arms and rubbery legs was running through the fog. Ben frowned. "Patrick, why are you off the train?" He'd never appeared so far away before. He was always right there, right close, sometimes too close, often too close, in fact, like the times he appeared when Ben was mid-evacuation. Patrick wasn't a hallucination that kept a distance. Ben slumped back against the cold metal wall, facing forward as the fog swirled by outside. He was no doctor, but he knew a significant change in hallucinatory behavior couldn't possibly be a good sign. "I'm near the end now," he said, really meaning it this time. "I can feel it. I can finally feel it." "Ben!" shouted Patrick from behind the train. "Benny boy! It's me!" His voice was strained and exhausted and desperate. That was different, too. He was normally a calm and collected hallucination. "I hear you," Ben said sadly. He stuck an arm out into the air and waved Patrick off. He coughed into his sleeve again. Blood and lime-green mucus spread across the cotton. "I barely even made it to the leaking part," he said miserably, though he guessed he should be grateful for that. Ben, it's me! Patrick! Ben! Stop the train!" Ben kicked out his foot and knocked against the next car. Babs reappeared and slid the door open. "What?" "Get Horace, will you?" "Why?" "I need him to do last rites." "Ben," Babs said, rolling her eyes. "No, Gabs, I'm serious. Babs, whatever. No joke. It's happening. I can feel it. Get Horace, please." "Can he even do last rites?" the Cabbage Patch blob piped up from inside the car. "He's not a priest." "He's a train captain," Ben pointed out. "He can marry people, so he can do last rites." "I think that's boat captains," Cabbage Patch said. "And you're not going to die," Babs assured him. "Not yet, anyway." Ben leaned his head back and closed his eyes. He was so tired. "Tell them, Patrick," he mumbled. "Ben! Ben!" Babs started. "What was that?" "What was what?" Ben asked. Babs stepped out onto the coupling platform and cocked her head to listen. "Benny boy, stop!" called imaginary Patrick, sounding farther away than ever. Babs stuck her head out of the train. "Did someone just call your name?" Ben opened his eyes. He looked up at Babs. He blinked. "What did you just say?" "Please, Ben!" Patrick was falling behind. The fog was swallowing him up. "Someone's out there yelling your name," Babs said. "What the hell? Did we lose someone?" Ben's eyes grew wide as hubcaps. He clambered to his feet. He gripped Babs on the shoulders and stared into her eyes. "Babs, do not mess with me. Can you seriously hear that voice too?" "Yes," Babs said, exasperated. "I've been saying that I can hear that voice. She stopped suddenly. She leaned forward and peered into the yellow-green cloud that was churning in the wake of the train. The fog blew away, and the figure emerged again, pumping its noodly arms and scrambling its awkward legs. "Do you know him?" Ben whirled around and gaped at the form running through the mist. "Describe him to me." "What?" "Quick, describe him to me!" Ben cried. "You see him, right? Who do you see?" "I don't know," Babs said, confused, squinting into the distance. "Tallish? Maybe a guy? Super skinny. Big head. I mean, gigantic head. God, how is he even running upright with a head that big?" she wondered. Ben's heart stuttered. His legs melted and he sank to his knees. His entire body flushed with chills, but not from the green fever. He opened his mouth and screamed in a voice stronger than he'd heard from his own throat in years. "Patrick!" "Ben!" Patrick screamed back, and now there was a strength in his voice, an iron that rose above the exhaustion, a joy that filled the world like a hot air balloon and rose and rose and rose until it pushed away the fog, and all they could see at long last, after all these years, through life and death, from ends of the world and the depths of loss, unbelievably, was each other. "Jesus," Ben said, through the tears he hadn't realized were now streaming down his cheeks. "Stop the train! Tell Horace to stop the train!" "Ben, who is that?" Babs asked. "Go tell Horace to stop the train!" he cried. "Please!" Babs nodded and ran through the door, heading toward the engine. Ben turned back to the flailing shadow running behind the train. "Patrick!" he screamed. "Patrick! Ben! The train is so fast!" Patrick panted loudly. It's going slow. It's fast for a person to run, Patrick yelled. It's supposed to go faster than people, Ben yelled back. I'm so tired, Patrick cried. Hold on! Ben threw a look down the train car and saw Babs disappear into the engine car. He popped back out and shouted, Horace is going to stop the train. Horace is still alive? Patrick shouted. I know. He's so small, Ben shouted back, and has such a weird mustache. I didn't think... Youth! He stepped into a gopher hole and bit the grass, hitting the earth hard and skidding across the loose gravel of the rail siding. Ow! He muttered into the ground. His bones were so tired. His legs were pudding. He decided not to get up just yet. Patrick! Ben shrieked. Ben could feel the gentle lurch of the brakes gripping the wheels, and the train started to slow. Even so, it would take a while for the whole thing to come to a stop, and Patrick's crumpled body was slipping back into the monkey fog. Soon he'd be hidden by the suffocating mist. Absolutely not, Ben grumbled. He wiped his hands on his jeans and lined himself up to jump. He took some deep breaths. We're going slow, he reminded himself. We're going slow. We're going slow. But from up on the platform, even 8 miles an hour seemed like a lightning pace. Ben frowned. He glanced at Patrick. He was almost fully gone now. Ah, fuck it, Ben spat. He jumped. His foot slipped on the metal and he flailed off the platform. His legs kicked up behind him and he slammed into the gravel siding chin first. He skidded down the embankment, his flat body spinning across the rocks and grass like a starfish frisbee. Ow! He groaned. He propped himself up on his elbows. He could just make out the shape of Patrick doing the same far down the tracks. Ben struggled up onto his feet. Patrick did too. Ben's muscles were still aching with flu, and his legs didn't respond as well as he would have liked. He staggered forward, trying to keep his balance. Patrick's legs weren't any better, having run down the better part of the mountain trying to catch the train. He wobbled in a wavy line as he stamped through the fog toward Ben. But after a few steps they both hit a rhythm, and then they were jogging, and then they were running. They collided into each other. Ben wrapped his arms around Patrick's ribs. Patrick held Ben like tendon grips bone. How the fuck are you here? Ben asked, shaking with sobs. Patrick laughed, streaming tears onto Ben's shoulder. That is a real long story. You were dead. I thought you were dead. I was fine. I was not. You died at Disney World. I almost died at Disney World. You let me think you were dead. I thought I basically was. Jesus, Pat, I could kill you right now. I know, Ben. I know. He squeezed harder. I could kill you too. They stood like that for a few more moments, or maybe 30 seconds, or maybe 5 minutes, or maybe an hour. Neither of them could tell. Finally, Patrick said, Should I let you go now so we can be normal? No, Ben said. You should not. Patrick smiled. Okay. 2. Hey, Ben, who's your weird friend? The train had ground to a stop a quarter mile down the tracks, and eventually Patrick and Ben had made it back on board. Ever since he'd climbed up into the old rust-routed, blood-stained Amtrak, Patrick had been shuffling around like a confused ghost, acting strangely. He touched a metal shelving unit and shuddered with a sigh of relief. He found an old lockbox, one that looked familiar, and he touched his fingers to his chest, feeling the warmth of that lockbox in his heart. He saw the grimy carpet, and he knelt down onto it and stroked it lovingly as if it were a long-lost pet. He's not my weird friend, Ben said uncertainly. He's my normal friend. The whole crew watched as Patrick walked up to the door of the long-defunct toilet. He rested his forehead against the nameplate that said, restroom, and placed his palms flat against the dirty door. He burst into tears. The crew turned back to Ben. They raised their eyebrows. "That's Patrick? The Patrick? The Apocalypticon?" Babs asked. "He's fine," Ben muttered. "Okay? Shut up. He's fine. Now listen, get out. Give us space," Ben grumbled at the baby caps. He herded them toward the door to the next car. "Go play your Tamagotchis or whatever." "What's a Tamagotchi?" Cabbage Patch asked, confused. "Some old person thing," Alice said. "Out!" Ben shouted. The baby caps shuffled reluctantly out of the car, leaving Ben and Patrick alone with the conductors. "Thanks for having me aboard, Horace," Patrick said, dabbing his eyes with his shirt. "I love what you've done with the place." Horace beamed with pride. "Thank you. We've made some upgrades in the last few years. The cars are easier to uncouple, simpler mechanisms there. That was Rogers' doing. That's Assistant Conductor Rogers over there. Sorry, bad at introductions." The man in the corner of the car raised his hand in greeting. "Heard a lot about you," he said. "You were strictly imaginary until just now. Sort of unsettling to learn you're real." "Well, I knew the last assistant conductor on this train, so sort of unsettling for me to learn that position still exists," Patrick said happily. "Please don't try to kill me." "Rogers is a pacifist," Horace assured him. "Good mind for the train. He'll be a great replacement when I'm gone." "Oh, stop. You'll never be gone," Rogers and Ben said in unison, in an exhausted voice that made it clear this had long been part of a strange routine for the crew. Horace twitched his mustache to show that he was pleased. "As you can see, we've removed about 3/4 of the seats in every car," he continued. "Gives us space for some bunks and just some general room to stretch our legs. We also keep the weapons in the car nearest the engine now. Keeping them in the back of the train had been Bloom's idea." He drifted off uncomfortably. He cleared his throat. "Keep 'em away from me, I guess. Keep 'em for himself." The other men exchanged awkward glances. "Hey," Patrick said, clearing his throat. "Bloom and everything he did? That wasn't your fault. I mean, look, people who are bald just naturally command fear and respect. That's Lex Luthor. That's Michael Chiklis. I mean, come on, Patrick Stewart? Please. Bald people just operate on a higher plane than we do, and that's okay. I hope to ascend to that plane myself one day soon," he added, massaging his receding scalp. Rogers grimaced, and Ben coughed like he might actually be choking on Patrick's words. But Horace seemed to take great comfort in what he said, because he nodded sagely and whispered, "Thank you for saying that, Patrick. You're right. You've always been right." "Oh, come on," Ben groaned. No, Patrick said, shushing Ben with his hands. "Let him express this." Horace took a deep, self-assuring breath. Then he nodded and got back to work. "Anyway, the train is in the best shape of its life. We actually took your hydraulic ramrod, Patrick, and made it stronger, lighter, and sharper." "Gross!" Patrick cried gleefully. "We also run lighter now, as you can see." Horace gestured toward the back of the train. 5 cars now instead of the 7, sometimes 8 we used to pull. "It's a lean, mean, slow-chugging machine," Patrick said admirably, patting the overhead luggage rail. It was sticky. He didn't like that. "That is part of it," Horace nodded, "though, also, cargo isn't what it used to be." He sighed sadly. "How can that be?" Patrick asked. "The world's as over as it ever was, right? People need stuff." He scratched his chin. "Right?" "Sure," Rogers nodded. "It's not the stuff that's the problem. It's the tracks. Seems like every few months some lunatic fringe blows up another line of tracks somewhere. Whole Northwest is cut off to us now after Iowa. Can't get to New York either. God knows what'll happen to those folks out there now we can't reach them. As for us, our delivery map has shrunk, and what we do have is pretty low value, ever since the Fogelvy incident. "Hey!" Ben shouted. "Sorry," Rogers said, raising his hands innocently. "It's just what they call it. The Fogelvy incident." "Stop saying it!" Ben cried. "Someone please immediately tell me, what is the Fogelvy incident?" Patrick asked, rubbing his hands together and practically salivating. "It's not my incident," Ben insisted. "This thing about a year ago," Rogers said, ignoring Ben. "We had some high-dollar cargo, taking it out west. The train was ambushed in the desert. They took the cargo, and Ben went after it. To his great credit," Rogers added quickly, watching Ben's face turn crimson. "But after a week or so, we got Ben back, and turns out he bungled the whole thing and the cargo was lost." "I didn't bungle it!" Ben cried. "I fought a giant and a tiger and like 8,000 zombies." "They're not zombies," Patrick whispered. "Shut up!" Ben said. "Anyway, it's not Ben's fault. It's just what happened," Horace said, trying to keep the peace. "I agree," nodded Rogers. "Ben was not to blame. He was the only one of us who went off after the cargo. Far as I'm concerned, he's something of a hero." Ben took a deep breath. "Thank you." We did later learn that the reason he went out after the robbers wasn't even for the cargo, but still— "Oh, fuck right off!" Ben yelled. His lungs tightened and he coughed into his fist. The phlegm was thick and his chest worked so hard that he fell to his knees during the fit. He choked up a gob of red and green mucus into his hand. When he saw the flash of color, he dropped his hand to his side, hiding it from the others. But Patrick saw it. He drew in a sharp breath. "Oh, Benny boy," he said, sinking down to a crouch next to his friend. "No." Ben glowered at everyone. "I'm fine," he insisted. Then he coughed for 3 minutes straight and wound up on his side, curled into a fetal position with dribbles of blood and monkey pus stringing down his lips. Patrick was down on his knees, trying to find ways to hold his hands around Ben's convulsing body that they might be able to be helpful in some way. "Not you, Ben," he said quietly, new tears welling up in his eyes. "You got the green flu?" "No," Ben said, coughing into a fit. "Yes," Rogers said, crossing his arms. "And you should know. It's bad." 3. Okay, so how bad is it? Patrick and Ben were back in the train car that was basically considered Ben's because it contained his cot and his blankets and his notebooks and things, though to be fair, it also held the canned food, the dried meat, and a few boxes of someday useful things like bottle openers and tweezers and rusty old cans of compressed air. Horace and Rogers had gone back up to the engine to get the train moving again, and Ben had given Patrick a short tour of the train he already knew, which didn't take long, but which also took all of the energy Ben had left, and he felt like he had to lie down. "It's fine," Ben sighed, sinking into his bunk. "I've actually never been stronger." He reached under his bed and pulled out a small box. He opened it and held it out to Patrick. "Here, before I forget. I love that you got me a present, but we're still going to have a heart-to-heart," Patrick warned him. He peered into the box. Sitting inside was a child's watch with a purple plastic band. The cracked plastic jewel had taken on a smoky yellowish hue with time, which made it difficult to make out the Disney princess in the flowing yellow gown beneath. Difficult, but not impossible. "I found it with some other stuff you left at Fort Doom. I figured I'd keep it." Patrick lifted Izzy's watch carefully out of the box. A teardrop fell and splattered across the purple band. "Thank you, Ben."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?